This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. We have a great show for you today. I know we always say that, but we really mean it this time, I swear. No, we do have a great show today. We have Army veteran Chris Marvin, who's created the National Park to Park Tour. Through this platform, he encourages Americans to visit our public lands in a unique way to explore our history and share our nation's beauty and legacy with our children. I feel like I represent our nation's beauty fairly well. What do you think?
You also represent our nation's children very well.
Oh, are you saying that I'm a child or I have too many kids? Because both of those are true.
Okay, real question. How many national parks have you been to?
I don't know what count, like the big ones. As far as the big ones, I have been.
Well, just any national park.
Probably 10 or so then.
Really?
We do a fair amount of traveling, and my wife loves parks.
I think 0 for me.
You should look. You can get a little card that'll let you go on to any of them as a veteran.
There's like almost none in the. There's one in the Smoky Mountain National Park, and then there's like one I think like in New Jersey.
Alabama has Trailer Park, isn't it?
We do have those.
I'm in Georgia. We are the exact same.
We have those. We have an abundance of those. All right. Well, it'll be exciting to talk to our guest today on the Park to Park tour and hear about the parks he's been to a lot. But talk about the start of summer vacation season and visiting national parks and a couple of programs that provide free access to parks, things what you were talking about. So current U.S. military independents, Gold Star families, and U.S. military veterans are eligible to receive free annual or lifetime passes which cover entrance or standard amenity, which could be interpreted as day use, fees at national parks, national wildlife refuges, national forests. I have been in a national forest and other federal recreational lands. These free passes are a way to thank U.S. military members for their support of our country and to encourage them to explore recreational opportunities on their public lands and waters. Fourth graders, if you have any fourth graders out there, and this would be, I believe those completing fourth grade and their families can also get free access to national parks and historic sites. The NPS Every Kid Outdoors program was created so that fourth graders and their families could discover our wildlife resources and history. And super producer Holly is thrown into the notes here that there's quite a ton of parks here in Alabama that I've been missing out on. So Horseshoe Bend National Military Park, Little River Canyon National Preserve, Tuskegee Airmen. That sounds like a really cool one. In the Institute. Russell Cave National Monument, Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail. Definitely need to check that out. Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument, Freedom Riders, and the Natchez Trace Parkway and National Scenic Trail.
I just want to point out that despite the fact that she just pasted in words, it was very snarky. There was a fair amount of snark. You didn't think you could just drop the names of parks and know that there was sass behind it, but there was.
Well, it's cool with like the Tuskegee Airmen and the Selma and the Civil Rights, things that is part of the cultural history here in Alabama. But it's kind of to your point, Joe. It's like, of the big ones, like, nobody thinks of any kind of like big, amazing, like Yosemite or like Yellowstone or,
I wonder how much money Yellowstone has made off of that show. I mean, seriously, because I want to go more because of the show, and I've only seen.
I thought you were just talking about
episodes.
Like the national park in general.
Well, just the name alone is a brand now. If people want to go visit just from that, probably.
I saw something that the national parks did that I thought was really creative, and there's a few places, and it's got like the little badges type stickers for all the different parks, and then they have like different books and like the metal water bottles that you can collect and kind of show off the parks that you've been to and stuff. And honestly, that's like a dream vision that I had, like your father, your husband, you have these things like you want to do. And I'm like, get the camper and take the 3-month trip to just go on the national parks, tour. And I would like to be able to do that. So idealistically, I want to go and visit more of these with my
I would love
kids
an
before they get too old.
Airstream
Yeah.
and to do so. Oh yeah, that would
Airstream.
be.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I don't know what it is. There's just something about the Airstream that just feels very like, I don't know, like Route 66 to me. It just feels like there's a part of America that was so unique and so short-lived that the Airstream kind of holds on to.
Well, it's something about like you have this little like container, right? You have this like this shelter, it's like mobile, you have your amenities, but it's like the call to adventure. It's like, the chance in going out into the unknown. And it's like that connection with wilderness and just with creation, the quietness and stillness away from the routine. And then, just like some of the national parks around some of the most beautiful, incredible features,
Yeah.
geographical features in the world. And to be able, the whole premise was to be able to protect those, for all time, for all generations. So,
And additionally, I don't think that people respect the land mass of the United States. We have more different types of geography and climate in the U.S. than I think any other country. I mean, we have everything from desert to rainforest to salt. I mean, we've got everything that you can. I think there's even jungle in some places. I mean, it's nothing like the Amazon or something, but
you know
the
what?
U.S. has
I'm
everything.
gonna be so bold, and I'm gonna say, this summer, why don't we make national parks great again?
You know what? Let's do that. You need a hat.
We could.
Yeah.
All right, National Park Service, we just gave you that one for free. So,
There's a free shout out just for
we'll have
you.
the show notes where you can plan your visits for veterans, Gold Star families, and the everykidoutdoors.gov for the fourth graders and their families. Obviously, you should take advantage of those opportunities. Yeah. And yeah, maybe I'll see you there.
Yeah, if you see my Airstream, let me know. That means I got an Airstream.
If you're at the national parks this summer, look for an Airstream. It may be Joe.
It looks brand new or stolen.
Just go from Airstream to Airstream and see if it's Joe.
Hey, if it's unlocked, that's not my fault. Oh, goodness gracious, y'all. All right, Alphas, please stick around. We'll be back with more about national parks with Chris Marvin right after the break.
The American Legion is raising awareness about PTSD and veteran suicide by offering hope, camaraderie, and support.
Be the one to help end veteran suicide.
Be the one to save one veteran.
Be the one to ask a veteran in your life how they're doing.
Be the one to reach out when a veteran is struggling.
Go to betheone.org and help the American Legion end veteran suicide.
Will you be the one?
All right, Alphas. Today we are joined by Chris Marvin, creator of the National Park to Park Tour. Chris, we appreciate you so much. Welcome to Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man, it's a real honor to have you on the show today. Actually met at the national convention last year, and we kind of had the idea to have you on. So it's a joy to be able to see that come to fruition. So that's a little teaser for you guys to come to Tampa this year because magical things happen at convention. So Chris, we had some great, kind of initial conversations. Really looking forward to digging in today and learning more about all the cool stuff that you're up to, especially with the Park to Park tour. And believe this or not, I told Joe before the show, I've actually never been to a national park. Not one. National forest. So I mean, I know. Don't even get me started on it. But so I'm really excited to hear about all the cool work that you're doing and hear some of your insights. But before that, let's go back to the beginning, back to Fort Rucker, Fort Novosel now. I want to know, did you call Enterprise home, Daleville home, or Dothan home during flight school? And what was kind of your service time like into transitioning and kind of getting out on the trajectory that you're on now?
Yeah, well, first thing is, how do you know I didn't live in Ozark? He left one out. The
Oh,
other
that's
side,
right.
yeah, yeah, the east side. I lived in Enterprise, and home of the famed Boll Weevil statue. But
That's right. That's the city of progress.
City of Progress, yeah. And so for me, military service runs deep in my family. So I'm actually a fourth generation Army combat veteran. I served in Afghanistan. My dad served in Vietnam. Both grandfathers World War II, and then I have a great grandfather who served in World War One. Didn't
Wow.
know all of that actually growing up, and it's not necessarily why I joined. Later, digging deeper, I found actually that along my paternal line, so like my sixth great grandfather, I think it is, William Marvin, served in the American Revolution in 1776, New York militia. So that's all this huge sort of familial military service. Of course, I joined the military like many people did because I needed money for college. And so did our OTC and at Notre Dame, and ended up in flight school at Fort Rucker, now Novacell. Yeah. But that was a great experience for me. It was exactly what I wanted to do in the military. My dad had been an aviator as well, and he did 36 years on active duty and a lot of National Guard, full-time National Guard stuff. So I'd kind of grown up in Illinois as a military kid, but lived in the same house my whole life because he was always in the Guard. But aviation was a huge part of that, and so I did follow in his footsteps. Even with aircraft selection, I ended up flying Blackhawks, which is the aircraft he flew at the end of his career. And took my first duty station at 25th Infantry Division at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii.
Nice. Yeah, well, I flew Apaches, and we didn't get quite as many of the awesome duty stations. It was seemingly 7 that we could go to. I think out of flight school, my first choice was Germany, and so they, the Army does what it does, and it decided to send me to Kansas instead. So I was always jealous of those that got time at Hawaii. What was your time at Hawaii like? Was it as wonderful as one might envision? Is that where you kind of started to develop this connection with land and national parks?
It's not the national parks connection yet. I will tell you a couple of things. Number one, if you want to jump back in, we have Apaches in Hawaii now. They actually are. Yeah. So we could accommodate you. And I say we because, I moved to Hawaii with the military. First time I'd ever been to Hawaii 22 years ago. It's where I'm talking to you from now. It's where I live. So it became home. And so, the short story of how it went when I got stationed in Hawaii was pretty well. But the longer story is that within a year, I had taken over as a platoon leader and was sent to Afghanistan. This is pretty early in the campaign. So we're talking about spring of 2004. Afghanistan's a couple years old. Iraq's about a year old at this time. And basically everybody from 25th ID deployed to one or the other. I was supposed to be in Afghanistan for a year, but ended up being there only 4 months. In that time I flew 40 combat missions. But I have the unfortunate distinction, Adam, you'll appreciate this, of having one more takeoff in my aviation career than I do landing. Was pretty badly injured in a helicopter crash near the Afghan-Pakistan border, real hostile area. For those that have been there, Fob Salerno, the coast area of Afghanistan, and was medevaced out with 2 broken legs, a broken foot, a broken arm, shattered all the bones on the right side of my face, did damage to both of my knees, both my hips, both my shoulders. So just my whole body, but I also like to list them one by one. So that started me on a whole different journey. Yeah.
You were in such a small percentage, of people that are in an aviation accident of that magnitude, and probably even a smaller percentage that survived and obviously didn't come out unscathed. But you're here today, seemingly whole. I bet you could tell us about all the pains that you probably still experience today as a result of that. But what was that like in that situation? Was it time was going by so slow? Was it happened in the blink of an eye? What was that kind of experience, like for you? Did you know the severity of the situation, the urgency of the emergency, so to speak? Or was it something that you didn't realize really till you woke up in a facility, later?
Right. Well, so we were a Black Hawk that had 4 crew members and 11 combat loaded Marines, and all the Marines survived, and 3 of the 4 crew members survived. So we had 1 fatality, and that was Sergeant Daniel Galvin. It's hard to think about, but obviously, everybody has lost somebody. It's miraculous that 14 people survive, and I'm lucky to be one of them. And I realize that like everything I do from here on out, whether it's for me or for him or for the other people, like that's kind of the mission that I have to take on. And this happened when I was 25 years old, and so have a lot of living to do beyond that. As far as the day itself, like I was conscious for the whole thing. I didn't see it happen because I was inside the aircraft working on trying to fix the problem. And then we hit, and then we flipped upside down. And I got really lucky. Like my body position allowed the aircraft sort of to not crush me in a way that it probably should have. And again, you get lucky, like fate puts you in a certain position, and then you realize that, there's probably a purpose for you. I think one of the things I pulled out of it was, that purpose is so important, right? That like this sense of purpose in our lives, and whether that's military service or something you do after the military, it's your family, it's the endeavors you take on, like that purpose is so important. And I cherish that. I cherish the opportunity to continue to have purpose. I was eventually knocked out by some morphine. It's this funny story of actually after half an hour of being extracted from the aircraft and thrown onto a medevac, and thinking that I was like all being saved now. No pain, by the way. You asked about that. Like no real pain.
Wow.
I'm so much like at the beginning, I'm fending off shock, trying to keep myself composed and make sure I get extracted appropriately, and like sort of leading these Marines through extraction instructions and failing and trying again and failing and trying again. Finally get on the medevac, think everything's good, and the guy pulls out what I remember to be the biggest needle I've ever seen in my entire life, like a 12-inch long needle, and he goes to stick it in my groin. And I'm like, what do you know? Stop. My one good arm, right? I have my left arm is the only arm that works. So I'm like, stop. What are you doing? I don't want that. And helicopter's already flying. It's loud. And he just looks at me and he mouths like, it's morphine. I'm like, oh, okay, bring it on. So he gives me the morphine, and then things get fuzzy. So I was conscious for the first, 30 minutes. Yeah. Things get fuzzy. I go through the field hospital, go through Bagram, end up in Longstool, ultimately end up in Tripler. Fast forward to like a 4-year recovery through 10 major surgeries.
What year was that again, brother? Sorry.
I'm hurt. I was hurt in 2004.
Okay. Same late 04. Twins.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. September 17th.
Oh, great. I got you by about a month.
Nice.
Yeah. So, so long recovery. And that's what shaped a lot of what I've done since, is like understanding the role that sort of veterans, combat wounded veterans like me, and Joe, and like folks that like what is our role in society? How are we perceived in society? What does society expect from us? And that's sort of built my career over the last 20 years.
And sorry to jump in here because I'm sure Adam always has, but it's interesting because when you go through these experiences and you come home, and especially as a wounded veteran, like weirdly that's a title that gets put up on a pedestal, and I don't think that that's good for us. I don't think that's good for us.
That's something that I became aware of from the very beginning, and I've described it with sort of these 3 things. Like the reaction that people have to a wounded service member or veteran is charity, pity, and then low expectations. And I started the process as I don't like any of them. I don't like to be treated like a charity case. I don't like to be pitied. And I don't want to have low expectations, but the pity is expected because I've shown photos of myself from that time. And I'm like, I'd pity that guy too. And then the charity is a reaction to the pity. It's like, well, I feel bad for this guy, so I want to help him. And look, I remember I am pretty adamantly against sort of all these organizations who are just handing stuff to veterans with no expectations. And I don't want to be taken on, a surfing expedition or a bear hunt, just because I got wounded. That's me. Other people can do whatever they want to do. For me, I wanted to sort of give back. And so, but I understand that sometimes that charity is necessary. I remember flying back to Illinois to live with my parents for a while because I had 2 broken legs and a broken arm, and they needed help doing everything. And somebody actually used some airline miles to upgrade me to first class, which literally I couldn't have fit on the airplane with my casts and stuff if they hadn't done that. So that's a good charity. Also, maybe the government should have done that, but that's an aside. And so I think that what really got me was the low expectations. This idea that people looked at me at 25 years old and said, oh man, as soon as you learn to walk, everything's going to be fine. And I'm like, well, no, I have a whole life to live. I want to start a family, get a job, live a life, buy a house, what all the things that everybody wants to do aspirationally in their life. And learning to walk is an important first step. However, I have much, much, much more that I want to accomplish. And so from then, Joe, I was realizing that, hey, there is something more to be done. And it was when I started a couple years later, maybe 2007, started getting involved with those nonprofits that actually challenge veterans to sort of volunteer in their communities. So like the Mission Continues and Team Rubicon, who are saying like, hey, you guys have skills and you should be helping other people who need stuff because maybe their house just got destroyed by a tornado or something. That made a lot of sense to me. And I think it makes a lot of sense to a lot of veterans that reinstilling that sense of purpose after the uniform is what we're looking for.
So after that recovery, were you able to get back on flight status, or that 4-year recovery was kind of towards your medical separation, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, I was terminal. Just some of the injuries that I had don't allow me to like physically manipulate I'm pretty normal. Like if you see me right now walking around, you won't think, and I've run triathlons and stuff, but like my stupid stuff, like my arm doesn't flip all the way over. And I can't operate the PCLs, the power.
Does that mess you up with like TikTok dances and stuff?
TikTok I've had to completely keep myself off of TikTok, both for that reason and national security reasons. But yes, I've stayed off of TikTok for that.
So is it the intersection of, that time where the nation was so focused on taking care of the veterans, and then, the empathy and then the charity pursued, that those opportunities kind of like came your way? So then you got to learn more about the organizations and kind of seeing what you liked and didn't like, or what was kind of the catalyst for you to, take that service forward and start becoming a participant in those?
I got really lucky. I heard about the Mission Continues on an NPR radio show like before it even really existed, and got in contact with them. Ended up being like person number 4 at the organization. So it's a big organization now, does great things. And then they actually assigned me, they said, hey, can you mentor this guy? This is a couple years later. I'm in my MBA program. And can you mentor this guy who's a Mission Continues fellow right now? He's starting another organization that does disaster response work. So I end up, my friend Jake Wood, who started Team Rubicon, and mentoring Jake. I often joke, and he knows I say this, that like, despite my mentorship, that he succeeded, because I don't think I did very much for him, but we became friends, and I've been involved with Team Rubicon since the beginning. So I got lucky to sort of be at the forefront of some of those younger post 9/11 driven organizations, following in the footsteps. I mean, I know for a fact that, the people who founded the Mission Continues, the principles behind that were based on one of the founders' participations in Boy State. Right. And the facts of what the program of the American Legion provided that he did as a kid and Boys Nation. And he said, well, we need something, that's a little bit different, but kind of caters to the people that I'm seeing now, as he was sort of visiting wounded guys at Walter Reed. And so you see the legacy that kind of passes down from the Legion through newer organizations, and the gift that is given through purpose for veterans.
You mentioned, the 3 things, the pity, charity, and the low expectations. And I guess that was a much better way of putting kind of what I was getting at, in that low expectations of being put on a pedestal. And it's like, you've done everything you ever need to do. Relax. Your time, you've earned a break. And that's dangerous, because it takes away that purpose. And so for me, those trips, I didn't do many of them, but I went on one where I found out about service dogs, and I fell in love with the idea of getting involved. So for me, that program was necessary, because it opened up a side of me, because I don't like taking stuff. If you wrote me a check for $1 million, it would drive me insane until I feel like I had made you that money back. It would drive me insane. And I feel like it was good for me to be in debt to these organizations that did stuff, because it reminded me that not everybody, even though I'm not the kind of guy that wants to go on 20 trips or whatever, one was enough for me. I just wanted the experience, because for all I know, I could have been a skier, who knows? But it gave me an opportunity to try something. And I think that that's kind of one of the things that you did. You've taken your family to over half the national parks in the country. Yeah. And, And not to circle away, because, we've talked about some pretty heavy stuff, but I think that it all ties in because this is part of your therapy. I mean,
Correct.
doing this kind of stuff is huge. Being useful again, having a purpose. The people that you lost and that poor 25-year-old kid that went through what you went through back then is a different human being than who you are now. And like, this is part of that process where we go, hey, Joe, you were a kid. I know you did the best you could because I know how I felt back then, and things didn't turn out great. But you know what? Let's make lives better for other people. And so I'd love to hear like what, how did that idea start? And not to circle away from anything, any point that you want to make, feel free to make that point. But I'm curious what made you go from, I've been through some really serious stuff and I want to go visit a whole bunch of parks. Like, I think that's a fantastic transition.
Well, so I will say first that I once got a $500 unsolicited check in the mail from a nonprofit. It's like, hey, you're wounded. Here's $500. And I'm like, you don't know me, and you don't know if I owe money to the electric company or not. Yeah. So right, exactly. So that probably is actually the turning point for me. That's like I sort of pushed away the charity, maybe to a degree that's too much. I've gone on a couple of those trips too. You go on one, you learn something, you make connections, and then what do you do with it, right? So I'm not telling anybody not to take up one of those trips, right? And a lot of people do those trips to national parks, and it's a great place, right? If you're looking for you don't know what, if you're looking for whether it's purpose or healing or connection, I think national parks offer all of those, and it's going to be different for the person. And the great part about the national parks is either you can, like it's the access, right? So I don't know what kind of trip you went on, Joe, or I went on this fly fishing trip where like I couldn't have accessed it myself, right? You had to have the boats, and you had to have the guide, and you had to know what river to go on and all that kind of stuff. You can find an organized trip that is taking veterans to national parks and experience these public lands that we all own in a way that could be healing or refreshing for a veteran. Or you can actually just go on your own, say, I can find my way to my own park. Apparently, unless you're Adam, who hasn't found his way to a park yet, but we're going to get you there.
I was waiting for you, Chris.
We'll take you. And then the next thing you can do is realize that the park doesn't have to be just for healing, right? And I've turned it into more of a celebration of patriotism, right? So to me, patriotism is a bit of a loaded word these days. It can actually be political, but like, look, all veterans, I think, feel in some way, shape, or form that they're patriotic, no matter sort of what they think politically. We love the country, right? And part of loving this country, for me, is loving the national parks. So not just the physical lands that are preserved and the amazing vistas and the experiences you can have there, but the fact that we thought to do it, over 100 years ago, the fact that somebody was like, this Grand Canyon thing is pretty cool. I could see it being ruined by a bunch of hotels. Maybe we should put it in trusted hands. Who can we trust? How about all of the American people? And so they did that sort of, and a lot of people think that the government owns these lands. That's actually, no, we all own these lands. This is, this land belongs to all Americans. Interesting thing too, it's not like all adult Americans or all voters or anything like that. It's the minute you're born, right? You are a part owner in Yosemite National Park and Yellowstone and all of the big ones and the small ones. And so for me, if I wanted to sort of look at what did I fight for, why did I serve, what was worth getting injured in Afghanistan, and there's a bunch of answers, freedom, liberty, democracy. I can't show my kids that. My kids were born after I got out, right? And so I can't show my kids those things outside of, I don't know, maybe I can show them democracy by taking them to a voting booth, but I vote by mail now, so that doesn't even work anymore. So you can talk to them, but what can you show them? Where can you give them that physical manifestation of what you fought for? And for me, it's touching the redwood tree that is preserved. And I've worked really hard to keep America safe, to keep democracy running, so that we can have parks that are owned by people. And every time we went to one of these parks, that's what we talked about. And how both the majesty of the park, but like how connected we are to it. And I see a direct connection, again, between my military service, my ancestors' military service, the people serving now, and national parks. And that's, of course, why the National Park Service has made, parks free to veterans, military families, and military members. All you have to do is show your ID, and you get a lifetime pass to go to every national park, because they also agree this is something you fought for. This is something you earned. This is your park. And you should come enjoy it.
So, Chris, tell us a little bit about what exactly the park to park tour is and has become, and how do you use that as a service tool now and platform?
Yeah. So I've obviously loved parks for a long time, but growing up in Illinois, I found myself at the age of, we'll say approaching 40, having been to 4. I've been to only 4 national parks. And they're just kind of by happenstance, both in Hawaii, because I live here. But I'm like, I realized that pace wasn't going to get me to all of them before I died. one every 10 years wasn't enough. And also I have these daughters who are growing up, and I want to show them this country that I fought for. So
how old are your daughters now?
So right now they are 12 and 15.
Okay, great.
Yeah, when we started this, they would have been in like 2nd grade and 4th grade.
Okay.
And that 4th grade will come in important in a second. But I was inspired by something I had seen on a documentary, the Ken Burns documentary about national parks, called the 1920 Park to Park Highway Tour, where a bunch of automobile enthusiasts, like the guys who were literally like driving Model Ts, excuse me, and they lived in the West, and there was no paved roads in the West in 1920. And so they said, we should drive around on like a barnstorming publicity tour to try to get the government to pave roads. And they did it from national park to national park, because that was also a new innovation along with cars in the early 20th century was, hey, we have this new thing called national parks. So they hit like 12 national parks over 76 days, but driving on rutted out wagon trails and getting stuck and flat tires and the whole 9 yards. And it worked. I mean, they sort of a lot of highways started to get paved out in the West at that time. So I knew 2020 was going to be the 100th anniversary of that. And I knew that I had a 4th grader, and I knew that I wanted to build this connection between veterans and parks. And so the key to the 4th grader part is that, and if folks don't know this, they need to know this, that the Every Kid Outdoors program, for non-veterans and non-military family members who don't have the military ID, but even for family members who do, in 4th grade, the kid, every 4th grader in America gets a free pass to every national park for a year. So what we did on our trip was, when the girls were in 4th grade, they were the ones who literally handed the pass off. Even though I could have shown my military ID, they're like, "Hey, Dad, I'll get you into to Olympic today."
Super cool.
Yeah, so we focused on that. So both girls went through sort of that 4th grade thing. We were originally planning to do this for 2020. COVID got in the way, so we did it. We did a 3-year trip, 3-year program that covered 3 summers, 30 national parks between 21, 22, and 23. And each of those summers, we basically did a 30-day road trip. I got a camper van. We lived in the camper van, and we hit anywhere between 7 and 9 parks in a year, and kind of tried to follow that route that the 1920 Park to Park Highway Tour took. And what we added to it was sort of the veteran aspect and the military service aspect, and that love of country, that patriotism. And I got to show my daughters, tons of parks. And we say there's 30 parks that we say we've been to on the Park to Park tour, which then we've been to a couple others separately. But that is our accomplishment over those 3 years. And it kind of continues now. Like if I take them to a park this summer, I'm going to throw it on the website and say this is also part of the Park to Park tour, because it's never going to end. Because I want to keep taking my kids. We need to do the other half of the national parks and make sure we've seen all of them.
So the good news is you can guilt them into continuing to hang out with you when they get too cool for it. It's like, we have to finish the tour.
We got to do it. Hey, we got to go to Alaska. There's a bunch of parks up there. We haven't been there yet. They're gonna be like, fine, we'll go to Alaska.
Well, what are the things that your daughters like at that age? Like, I mean, obviously there's the time with like you as a father and that bond, the call to adventure, right? Being out there, being in connection with the creation, these incredible geographic features that are like unlike other places in the world that are at these at the really big parks. But from your perspective looking back, what was it that was so alluring to this, that your daughters had so much fun with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we focused on a couple different ideas that we wanted to sort of perpetuate through the visits and the writing and media that we were doing around the tour itself over the years. The first one is the patriotism, military veteran connection, right? The part that I've explained. The second one is the Every Kid Outdoors program. And the fact that it's trying to tell people around the country, if you don't think you can get into parks or it's not easy, use this as an inspiration when your kid hits 4th grade. It's the perfect age to take them to a national park for the first time. And hopefully that will continue. And the third one was kind of the idea that we're preserving this land. So talking about climate change, talking about, I can't tell you how many fires we saw. So I was able to sort of literally demonstrate, a lot of our national parks are burning right now because of climate change, right? You're just seeing an entirely different weather patterns and heat and dry and then you get wet and rain, you get mudslides, all the things. And these are happening inside these treasured places that we've preserved. And I can't honestly, half the parks we went to had some fire damage in the last couple of years. And so talking about climate change, but also talking about the importance of preserving these parks. And then I got a chance to work with the National Parks Conservation Association during this time as well. And got to talk a lot about the military parks that are that are preserved. So not these big. There's 63 big capital M, capital P national parks, right? But there's 430 something. I think 434, 435 units in the national park system. So you're talking about national monuments, national memorials, national scenic byways, stuff like that, national rivers. So my guess, Adam, is that you're actually incorrect. You may not have been to one of the big 63,
That's right.
but you've been to the National Mall in DC, right? I assume that is a national park. Right. So I've
been to national forest in Texas, and then Holly was telling us all the things in Alabama around the civil rights and Selma and things like that. And it's okay, you don't really think about, have I been to Yosemite? No, but so that's a good point. And those
Tuskegee Airmen near you too.
Yeah,
right?
Tuskegee. Some incredible things, right? To your point, and it's the same ethos, right? Let's preserve that which is worth protecting and sharing with generations to come.
And some of those are national military parks. So you think about Gettysburg, you think about Antietam, Shiloh, these are all places that are Civil War, but also Pearl Harbor, out here, right? So that's run by the National Park Service. It's a national memorial, I believe. And so you have all these places where you can sort of touch this history. And you, Adam, you talk about national forests, you're expanding to further public land. So there's, that's Forest Service, but it's also Bureau of Land Management, all these public lands where you can sort of camp and utilize lands for free. So there's so many opportunities in public lands, but it centers for me around the national parks. They're the crown jewel of our public lands. But I think for veterans, just getting to Gettysburg, is a really great experience, or anything else that preserves the military history. And while I think there's 25 or 30 in that range, things that are sort of identified as national military parks or have sort of military somehow in the title, there's over 100 of the 400 something national parks units that have some connection to military history. And so there's, everything from the Buffalo Soldiers, who were in Yosemite in the early days, all the way to, 9/11 memorials and stuff like that.
So I got a good question for you. It's since you have so much firsthand experience, and so categorically there is the understanding of what these are, and then the ability to go and experience them, and to do so, with family or kids, and then what that means to you as the individual, what that means to us as the collective. Then there's also fighting for this land, and going and participating in what we fought for, and so honoring it in that capacity. But when you think about national parks system, and it sounds like you've worked, with it, with some of the conservation, efforts. So it's the questions around how could we maybe better engage veterans and families, not to just go and see it as visitors, but to be kind of more of part of the mission, or protecting it in some way, shape, or form. Is there work to be done? Are there opportunities for veterans to serve within the national park conservation ecosystem? Do you see opportunities, there that are not yet there, or what's your commentary on that?
This sounds simple, but I do think step one is visiting and immersing yourself, right? I think there's someone who has not stood at Great Basin National Park, which is in Nevada, and been there at night under a clear sky to see what the Milky Way looks like. Someone who hasn't seen, Old Faithful erupt, or someone who hasn't sort of walked the trails into the amphitheater of Bryce Canyon. Like, these are inspirational moments that stick into your mind, and there's the big ones, right? And trust me, the big ones are worth it. Yellowstones, Yosemite, Zion, Grand Canyon, they are worth it. But man, there are some underrated parks out there too. There are some ones that, you know, that people don't think about or talk about or visit that much, that are just, everyone says, what's your favorite? And I'm like, I don't know. You can't pick a favorite. But I'll give you 6, you know, and 6 reasons. And then if you ask me tomorrow, I'll give you 6 new ones. So I think that visiting is important, and it's so easy for veterans and military families to visit, because at least the cost barrier has been removed from an entrance standpoint. Still have to, you know, take a trip, take the time off work, you know, drive or fly there and spend time on vacation, basically. But we encourage people to plan that. We share our itineraries on the Park to Park tour so that people can do that. As far as conservation is concerned, I'm a huge fan of both the National Parks Foundation and the National Parks Conservation Association. So become a member of NPCA is the first thing, if you care about parks, you should do. And make sure you're supporting their work, because they lead the way on this. And, you know, I think right now is a great time to do it, right? So you're seeing cuts to Park Service staff. That is going to affect the park experience, right? Like, as visitors this summer, we will see people having worse experiences at the national parks. You also see, you know, we're losing visitor centers, we're losing some preservation stuff when some of the leases are expired. And then, you know, there's thoughts that they're going to start mining in national parks. And I think a lot of times people hear about the mining in national parks and they're like, well, that's probably in a national park way up in Alaska, and it's a big, expansive land, et cetera, et cetera. True. But I think there's 120,000 applications for mining in public lands right now. And so, like, that's 120,000 places that didn't have a mining operation on it. And look, I drove once from Carlsbad Caverns and Guadalupe Mountains National Park, which are kind of co-located. People don't realize that. One's in Texas, one's in New Mexico, but they're adjacent. The caverns are like kind of like the caverns under the Guadalupe Mountains, which is also a park. It's kind of cool. And I drove from there to Big Bend National Park. So I drove through West Texas. I've driven through a lot of really scenic places, right? So driving from Yellowstone to Glacier, or driving down through California, through the Sierra Nevadas. West Texas is not a scenic drive. Anybody who's done it, unless you think that oil derricks are the most scenic thing you've ever seen, I get it. Oil is necessary. We run cars. It has to happen somewhere, right? But there's places for that to happen that aren't owned by all the American people. And I think that veterans should be the ones who are kind of standing up and saying, like, hey, let's not drill for oil, or actually a serious proposal is drilling for uranium in the Grand Canyon. It's an adjacent land next to Grand Canyon National Park that's owned by Bureau of Land Management, and they want to drill for uranium there, adjacent to the Grand Canyon. It's like, can we just this is a big country. We've preserved some places for all of us. Can we preserve those? Like, this was done by over hundreds of years by many intelligent people. And look, at the end of the day, here's my deal. I fought for it. I went to Afghanistan. I fought for this country. This country gave me Yellowstone. It gave me Yosemite. It gave me Channel Islands. It gave me Bryce Canyon and Arches and all of them, Great Smoky Mountains, whatever. I want all of them for me. I want all of them for my kids. So if veterans start standing up and saying that, and using that veteran voice to advocate for the parks and the preservation of parks, I think that it'll go a long way. I think that, as you've seen a lot of sort of the changes from the federal government in the past months, there's 2 places where all of a sudden the public at large pushes back. And it's like, you know, maybe they're not pushing back on IRS cuts, like, oh, IRS staffing is down or whatever. When they talk about veterans and when they talk about national parks, you all of a sudden people saying, like, no. Do not cut the veteran benefits. Do not take my national parks away from me in any way, shape, or form. And so, you know, that's a horse that I'm riding right now, to kind of say, like, who are the veterans who are fighting for parks? I want to hear from them. I want to work with them and leverage the Park to Park tour that I've created to demonstrate that saving our national parks is a form of patriotism, an expression of our love for this country.
Sorry if I keep looking over. Every time you say a national park, I'm looking it up. I'm looking at the Channel Islands right now. Like, every one of these, I just want to go visit. Like, this looks
addicting.
Channel Island. Look up Channel Islands if you haven't. It looks like the kind of place that I want to start planning to go visit like right now. This
And look,
is so
California
cool,
has I think 8 national parks, if I'm thinking correctly. I got to count in my head, but I would guess the Channel Islands is the least visited. A, because it's an island, it's hard to get out to. You got to get a ferry and stuff, but also it's not really well known. But it's accessible from Los Angeles. If you take a day or two and take the boat out, you can camp out there. A lot of day trips to Channel Islands too. There's another park in California called Pinnacles National Park. It's behind me up here on my wall. And that one, I talked to people in San Francisco, and they're like, have you been to Pinnacles? They're like, no, I've never heard of it. Like, it's like an hour and a half from the Bay Area. It's phenomenal. You're going to see a California condor there. You're going to do some of the coolest short hikes you've ever done in your life, and see more wildlife than you thought California could possibly have.
Short hikes.
So everybody thinks about, again, Yosemite, Yellowstone Glacier,
Right.
Grand Canyon, Zion. Those are the big ones, right? Great Smoky Mountain is the most popular national park because of where it's located in Tennessee and North Carolina. But there's some hidden gems out there. One of the best hikes of my life was in Guadalupe Mountains. Canyonlands is one of the 5 in Utah. It's not the best of the 5, but it's like this hidden gem that like you can only access if you're backpacking certain parts of it. They say the North Cascades is the least visited national park, which is kind of a loophole because a highway goes through it. But the part the highway goes through is technically not part of the national park, and everybody stops there and they look at these beautiful lakes. And to get to the actual national park, you have to hike in. Of course, we did, and we checked the box on that. But tons of people visiting the national recreation area without visiting the national park. And I'll put a plug in for maybe my favorite, which also has a great story, which is Olympic. Olympic National Park might be my favorite if I had to decide on a favorite. I've been there the most.
9 tabs open on these right now.
Keep them coming. You're going to get 63 tabs by the time we're done. Because there's 63
I'm done.
But,
if you hadn't mentioned it by now, it's an afterthought.
Let's talk about Olympic real quick, though, because Olympic is a super interesting place. It's the only temperate rainforest in North America. And it's truly a rainforest, but also they get snow. So I backpacked there when I actually I was snowed on. And the reason I was backpacking there is I took a bunch of veterans to backpack there. This is separate from the park to park tour, which I did take my girls to Olympic. It's a huge park. It's like as big as Yosemite, except for inside of it, there's all these privately held lands and a lot of also native held lands. So indigenous tribes still have reservations there. The Hoh rainforest is on the Pacific coast of Olympic, and you can drive in off of Highway 101, right, a famous highway. You drive 3 miles in. I take it back. I think you drive 17 miles in. You drive 17 miles in, and then you hike 3 miles down the Hoh rainforest trail, and then you find this very specific place where you walk under this split tree, and you go about 500 yards into the woods, and you're looking for a rock that is about the size of a $50, and it's a red rock sitting on a log. And this is the 1 square inch of silence. It is like, based on sort of a scientific audiological study, the quietest place on earth, tied with a bunch of other really quiet places. But you're inside a rainforest, 17 miles from the highway, and it is the quietest place on earth. So here's the rub. The only thing that interrupts it is the Navy flying growlers from Whidbey Island over Olympic National Park. So you're in the quietest place on earth, and all you can hear is birds and wind. And then all of a sudden you hear the loudest jet in the Navy fly over you. And so we went there to try to. Okay. Yeah. You're bad. Well, we got aviators. We got
lands.
Yeah. So we're working on that. We said, hey, look, veterans are using this place for solace, right? For quiet, for healing. And that's what we had. We had veterans on this backpacking trip who really were looking for that quiet in their life, both literally and metaphorically, and asking the Navy just to fly a different route. And so that's another way that you see veterans advocating for the preservation of these natural soundscapes, or just anything that is part of our parks.
That place looks crazy. I did the Hoh River Trail. Yeah. It looks foreign. Like it looks like something I've never seen in my life, which is the whole purpose of we were talking about this before about, the North America has got almost everything. There's and these pictures do nothing justice. Like when you see something, when you experience a different place, it unlocks something inside of you.
It does. I think that's what veterans could find in these parks. And the way we did the trip was super cool because we started in Denver. We did kind of the Rockies, right? So we did Rocky Mountain, Grand Teton, Yellowstone Glacier, and then we went to Washington State, so the Cascades and the Olympics. So it's really mountainous, right? We did North Cascades, Olympic, and Rainier. The next year we started in Seattle and went south to Crater Lake, and then did most of California, like down to Pinnacles and Sequoia. So Kings Canyon, Sequoia, Yosemite, Redwoods, Lassen. We filled in California and some other like off-cycle trips, and then in year 3 we did the desert Southwest, mostly Utah. So you got Zion, Bryce, Capitol Reef, highly underrated park, Capitol Reef, Canyonlands and Arches, hit the Grand Canyon, and then went over to like Mesa Verde in Colorado, and then up back to Seattle and hit a couple more, like Black Canyon of the Gunnison and Great Basin, again, underrated parks. And so we were able to see those different landscapes just in the West. So the park park tour existed really just west of the Mississippi, west of the Rockies mostly. You get the mountainous stuff, you get the California stuff, you get the desert Southwest stuff, and all of a sudden you're like, man, what diversity. And by the way, we haven't touched like Everglades and dry Tortugas, which are in Florida. We haven't touched, the Great Smoky Mountains or Shenandoah, which are accessible to people who live in the mid-Atlantic, or Acadia in Maine. Like there's just so many amazing parks. Even in the Midwest, you have parks in Michigan and Minnesota, like in the Boundary Waters, and Isle Royale, which has wolves in Minnesota. So like these crazy places that we were smart to preserve as Americans, and we need to keep fighting for it. Just like we fight for our country, we need to fight for our parks.
Well, look, there's such a focus on veteran mental health and being able to heal our forces after what we've endured 20 years of sustained combat. And then there's more acute injuries like the ones that you and Joe face. And I know I do a lot of work around the advocacy and development of programs, research, infrastructure, and advocacy around some of these alternative therapies. Not necessarily that's an alternative therapy, but that's one of the things that we say, look, if you could double blind placebo clinical trial FDA approved, what are the effects of being out in these parks, in nature, in community with family? I know from like probably the scientific perspective, the results would be profound. It would be, hey, how can we prescribe this to every person? Right. Or individual. So I believe that a large part of healing happens in nature and in connection to nature, just like it does in community and with family. And so I think you've done such a great job of outlining the importance of this to you, to our country, to our community, to the veteran community. And then, it's also just kind of elaborating on the healing, therapeutic process of being able to go out into the call of the wild. It's the adventures out there. It's the Americanism, kind of wagons west, and what are we going to find out there? And when you go out there and you can be away from silence and from all of humanity and the noise and the distractions, you can find yourself and you can find a little bit of peace. One question I would be interested for your perspective, and this is kind of shifting the landscape just a little bit more to the kind of the mental health side of things, is because you've been a part of some of the largest VSOs that were helping and support in all the ways that they could. I would just be interested from your perspective of when you started to see more of kind of a shift and evolution in the services that have been offered. Because so many of the things that we're fighting for and advocating now, so many things that the veterans have gone out and done, to include the park to park tour. And maybe in like 2015, when my brother and I were starting our first nonprofit about neurorestorative protocols to reduce inflammation and rebalance hormones to heal from a traumatic brain injury, well, we would just say if you had a TBI, what good is it going to do to go and pet a horse? Equine therapy is so we devalued other programs and other things because we said, well, if you don't repair the neurochemistry of the brain, like that neurochemistry is still, not able to fire together. So you can go and give somebody all these experiences or these beautiful programs and stuff. But can they really benefit, from it? And so, but now, 10 years later, understanding that they all have their place, kind of like, Joe was saying, kind of like you were saying, these experiences that you go on can provide, value. It may not be the end all be all. And if you're just going around from one program to the next, then, you've lost the meaning of, why these things exist. but they work in connection with each other and in concert. But I would just be interested on, kind of your perspective of how you've kind of seen that landscape change. And when did you notice, that, some of these organizations started to appear that were really kind of thinking about this, in a different way, because it's been a lot for our community. It's been a lot of growth and discovery and learning. And, we're seemingly in the middle of a great metamorphosis and transformation. And, the last thing that I'll tie in at the very end, but yeah, after your perspective is, I think as more people get access to these programs and find that peace, and maybe they can find some of that peace out there on the trails, right? But then maybe it's these other programs need to be able to have better partnerships and connect back into the parks as kind of like one of those, one of the events, later in your healing process. And so, yeah, just kind
And
of
it's accessible.
think about
like
that.
you said. I mean, I can just jump in my car and go right now, and that's really cool. That's what makes this so interesting.
Right. You don't need a prescription for it, right? You don't have to change the Controlled Substances Act. You don't have to,
Go to Costa Rica.
But you've seen it all unfold in front of you, Chris. So I just, it's really just, I'm more interested to just kind of hear your perspective, since you've seen so much of it over the years.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you hit it on the head with sort of all of it's important, because if you have upwards of 18 million living veterans, like and different people dealing with different things and doing things for different reasons, like you're never going to find that that one size fits all, right? So like everybody can find their own thing, and we need to offer things that are proven to work, right? That can withstand sort of scrutiny and trials, and whether they're clinical trials or whether they're just like sort of proof in the product. I think I've always kind of categorized organizationally that there's these great organizations, veterans service organizations like the Legion, VSO, that are incredibly necessary, certainly necessary for a lot of the legislative work that happens and what happens at the VA, as well as building community, at the grassroots level. But their mission is always typically to serve veterans, right? How do we help veterans? And those are super necessary, for veterans who need help, right? Not for veterans who don't need help. And that makes sense. The Legion, I think, has actually, again, the prototype for expanding beyond that and saying like, okay, also then how do veterans who may or may not need help anymore then dive into their community? And so you look at stuff like, the Americanism stuff that the American Legion does. So baseball and Boys State, Boys Nation, et cetera. That is veterans showing up in the community. And that bridges to a lot of the organizations that we saw in the post 9/11 era. I think starting around 2007 or 8, you started to see these organizations that I have actually referred to as veteran empowerment organizations, because yes, they might serve the veteran, they might help the veteran, but for the most part, they're saying, hey, veterans, can you help other people? Right. And that's fine. So it's again, the model of, you're an American Legion post that's going to run Little League Baseball. Okay, you're going to volunteer in your community. You're going to show up for disaster response. You're going to, have veterans serve as poll workers for elections, right? You're organizing veterans in a way that allows them to be community builders. And then you take that one step further to, you look at the organizations out there that aren't veteran focused organizations, but are trying to do things to strengthen any part of our nation, and say, well, are you using veterans to do that? Because veterans, we know from the data that's out there, from the census data, that the veterans vote more than their civilian counterparts. They volunteer more. They talk to their neighbors more. They are more likely to belong to civic organizations and give to charity, right? You could say veterans are better citizens than non-veterans, on average, only on average. But what we like to say is that veterans are actually more civically engaged, right? They're more likely to be engaged in their community. And so when you're looking to do anything as an organization, you can enlist these veterans. And I think so through that process, if you're the veteran, if you have to go from the beginning of where I need help, then you move up to, okay, how can I help somebody else? And then you move into like, what do I really care about in this country? And now I can walk up and say, what I really care about is, say, preventing gun violence. Well, I'm going to find the local gun violence prevention organization in my community. And I'm going to say, hey, I'm a veteran. I care about this. How can I make sure my kid feels safe in school? I know a lot about guns. Wouldn't that be a great thing for me to help with? And so that's a sort of an individual journey, I think, that we've seen evolve. And people have to pick their own. They have to select their own journey. But I think over the last 15 or 20 years, you've kind of seen that grow for our community. I think what we were at risk of before those organizations took over was kind of what Joe was mentioning earlier, was veterans just being seen as charity cases who are unemployed, have PTSD, and tend to be homeless. And those things all exist, but they do not represent most of us. And so they exist. So let's deal with the folks that are dealing with that stuff. And let's recognize that the rest of us are just kind of normal vets, people who are living normal lives, who used to be veterans, who used to be in the military, who are now veterans. And let's look at it from that lens. And let's make sure that, again, what was at risk happening was the society starts to just believe that veterans are charity cases. We can't have society thinking that. We have because society are the taxpayers who invested in our leadership training, right? We were in the military, we learned to be leaders, team builders, and problem solvers, and we have to come back and do that in our communities. So yeah, take care of yourself first, take care of your buddies second, take care of your community and your family third. And look, I'll bring it all back to the national parks, because when I took my daughters to the national parks, talk about mental, emotional, and physical health all intersecting at the same place. I'm
probably
hiking,
spiritual
right?
too. Yeah,
absolutely spiritual. Yeah, I'm hiking in these spiritual places, seeing the whole rainforest, seeing the Old Faithful go off. I'm sharing it with my family. There's that connectedness, right? And I'm doing it, by the way, sometimes I'm doing it completely alone, or just with me and my daughters. We'll find ourselves on a trail and we can't see or hear somebody for hours. And sometimes you're sitting in traffic waiting to go through the gate because everybody wants to be at this place that we all love and own. And then we're sitting on bleachers waiting for Old Faithful to erupt. And you're with hundreds and hundreds of Americans and foreign visitors and understanding what we have and what we fought for. So it really, the parks for me, that was my journey, right? To run the gamut from all the way from I need help all the way to now I'm out here advocating to sort of, provide this for the greater good of the public, not just veterans, but everybody. And everybody needs to find that journey. And I think if most veterans do, we're actually just going to build a stronger America out of it, because we have so many talented people who have trained to be leaders, team builders, and problem solvers.
Oh, Chris, like that was awesome, man. What a great reflection, and really being able to tie it back into the national parks. And I love what you said, talking about, at some point the veteran exits service and goes into I need help, into how can I help, almost into how can I create something and connect to something of meaning and purpose. And everybody has this individualized, personalized journey through that. And it's been really cool. I'm so glad that we both connected with the Legion to be able to connect at convention last year. That led to you coming on here. That all the ways in which you went from flight school and everything that you endured to be here and make the impact that you are. Really, really cool. And also to talk even about things like we were talking before the show, like this is the 100th anniversary of American Legion baseball, and even getting to hear like you actually played American Legion baseball growing up, right? Catcher, I believe.
I was a catcher. Yeah, years of American Legion baseball. It was. I thought it's probably I think I thought that was what the American Legion was when I was a kid. Was a organization that ran Little League baseball, because that was my exposure to it. I eventually learned that it was much more than that, but it took me till an adult to realize the value that having that impact on kids and community and society that the Legion chooses to have, the value that provides. And so yeah, I did a number of years in American Legion baseball, led to a career that lasted all the way through high school. And I think in junior high, we got second in state, and with a bunch of guys who had all played American Legion baseball together in Bloomington, Illinois, post 55, by the way. I'll give my shout out to American Legion.
Shout out post 55. Well, it's cool to see 100 years later, how, you just show up and find the stories where that made an impact, on someone such as yourself, to, guys that around, games and fun and competition, but the ethos there was a brand recognition and a value system that's permeated, over time. So really cool to have you on, and huge shout out to American Legion baseball for 100 years of impact. So the last thing we have for you before you go today, Chris, is kind of a fun lightning round. It's just kind of like whatever comes top of mind. You don't have to overthink the answers. We just got 6 or so questions for you. So I'll go first, and then Joe will go. And they're really, really actually pretty hard. So the first one is, what is your favorite national park snack when you're out on the trails?
National park snack. I have a proprietary trail mix, and
Do
I know
you
this
really?
is lightning round. Yeah, I've actually put an Instagram video on our Instagram site, but it's
Okay. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah.
It has wasabi peas in it. That's the secret.
Okay. Well, I got to check this out now. Can I order? Can you order it?
No, it's just a trail mix that I
Okay.
share. You
That's
make it
it.
yourself. You just got to find those wasabi peas.
All right.
I got a new tab open. What's your most underrated park?
Oh, most underrated park is Great Basin. With Pinnacles and Guadalupe Mountains as a close second, but Great Basin because 10,000-foot mountain, there's a cave, and the best stargazing you can see.
One park you haven't visited that's on your top of your list.
I haven't been to the most visited park in the country, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I almost had a trip planned there this summer. I need to get there. It is top of my list. That and basically all the parks in Alaska.
Okay, well, you let me know when you're going, because I'm only about 5 hours from that one, so I'll come meet up with you.
All right. Let's see here. Best sunrise or sunset you've seen in the park. And I'll actually say I woke up one time on a bike trip across the country in New Mexico, and it's the prettiest sunrise I've ever seen in my life. I didn't realize it could be different,
sunrises,
but there was just something about the sunsets were fine, but the sunrise in New Mexico where we were was, oh my God, like
this is different from the time you woke up in Old Mexico.
Well, that happened one time too, but this isn't my interview. This is Chris's.
That was just a sunset. I think the go-to answer should be Acadia National Park in Maine because it's the first sunrise in the country, basically, and people go to Cadillac Mountain. But that is not my answer. My answer is Haleakala, which is the top of the mountain in Maui, Haleakala National Park. You have to get up really early, and the reason. First of all, tons of people do it and they go to the top and they see it. They get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and they see the sunrise. It's the best. I have seen it from the crater backpacking in Haleakala, and it is just that much better. That sunrise also probably exists on the Instagram feed. So it's a time lapse of the best sunrise I've ever seen.
All right. We got to check out Chris's Instagram feed. What is your preferred way to sleep under the stars? Tent, hammock, cabin, or
on top of your brand new Airstream?
I mean, to truly be under the stars, I think you need to be obviously no tent. You got to be able to see them. But my favorite way to sleep under the stars is to look at the stars with my daughters and then climb back in the camper van where they feel safe, especially from bears. And so they're scared of the bears. But we had this wonderful camper van company in Seattle called Peace Vans, gave us a great deal, and I love the camper vans. So we just unzip the window of the camper van and sleep out under the stars that way.
Honestly, we need to put together like a little blog with all your recommendations. This is great.
For sure.
Perfect tie-in here. Wildest wildlife encounter.
Oh, the wildest wildlife encounter. Okay, we've seen grizzly bears, we've seen moose, we've seen bull elk, all the big ones. Saw 3 rattlesnakes walking in Kings Canyon with my daughter. I think the wildest is, this is going to be crazy, the raccoons in Pinnacles. In the campground in Pinnacles National Park, there are what seems like 1,000 raccoons, and they're just hanging out like house cats. And so the wildest encounter was my daughter was sleeping in the camper van. I had the tailgate open. I went to the picnic table to grab something. I came back, and the raccoon was in the van, 6 inches from her head, and he was so fast. Yeah. So that cool. I would honorable mention too, because you said Channel Islands, to the foxes at Channel Islands. They're a unique fox that only exists there. Also about the size of a house cat, and they have the bear bins, but they're fox boxes instead of bear bins. So you got to put all your food in because those foxes are crazy and they steal your food.
I was like, what are we talking about?
4 days at Farish campgrounds in Colorado, and I fell asleep and I woke up to the ground shaking as bison went walking straight between mine and my brother-in-law's tent, which was like 10 foot apart from one another on the other. He was on one side of the fire. I was on the other. And they walked between us, and I got woke up, not by any sound they were making, but by the fact that I could feel the ground shaking. Anybody who thinks they could fight an animal like that and even hurt it is an absolute imbecile. You know, there's like 10% of American males think they could beat a bear in a fight. Like, it's some crazy, wildly, insanely optimistic number. You just need to hear it walk before you're like, no, I'm actually never going to touch one of these things.
Joe's actually fashioned his prosthetic as a weapon to use against bears out on the trail.
I was getting ready to.
Okay, you could hide some bear spray in there. That's more of a
I used that on my brother-in-law, so I was out.
All right, last one before Joe closes. What if you could hike with one historical figure? Who would it be and why? And where would you take him?
I'm gonna just give the easy answer on this one for anybody who's a big fan of national parks, and I would want to be in Yosemite Valley with John Muir. He's historically become a bit of a controversial figure for some of the things he said, but man, the way that he wrote about nature, the way that he experienced nature, the things that he did, the advocacy that he did for national parks. I mean, you know, he is the guy that brought us the national park system as we know it. And he's just this naturalist that saw the outdoors differently than the rest of us. And I'd want to experience that from him.
Wasn't Roosevelt real big? Was it one of the Roosevelts in Colorado that was really big about like set up a national? I was out there with my brother. He's, you know, the reason I had the bear sprays because he's also a Mason. So I was, that was a joke. But I was out here with him and he took me to one of their things and it was like an anniversary of, I don't remember exactly what it was because I didn't want to act like I had no clue what was going on by asking questions. So I just sort of sat through the ceremony.
Teddy Roosevelt was a huge national parks proponent. He got a lot of parks into the system. And for those that don't know, one of the 63 national parks is actually Theodore Roosevelt National Park, which is in North Dakota. And so
it wasn't it was in Dakota. Sorry, you're right. They went. Yeah. Sorry.
No, but I mean, he was responsible for a lot of national parks being created. So I'd happily, after John Muir, hang out with Teddy Roosevelt. And hey, look, Abraham Lincoln was the person who first set aside Yosemite before the end of the Civil War. Actually, Yosemite wasn't a national park yet, but it was preserved. So it goes all the way back to Lincoln. As far as this national parks public lands
I
heritage.
want to wrestle, by the way. I want to wrestle Lincoln.
He might be one of the 10% that could beat a bear. He was a pretty good wrestler.
Yeah, he might have been. All right. And so last question for me, what advice would you give to fellow veterans looking to, and it's kind of a softball pitch here, looking to reconnect with their kids, your community, or just themselves through the outdoors? It's the best way to get that rolling.
It's go to national parks, obviously, but I'm gonna just again plug the Every Kid Outdoors program. And so if you have somebody approaching or grandkid approaching the fourth grade, that is the year. Do not miss. And this is for every public land, right? It's not just national parks, but it's national forests as well. It's all units of the national park system. The kids get in for free, and I'm telling you, it's different when the kids are the ones that are getting you. And again, as veterans, military families, we can get into parks for free for our whole life, but these kids can take you to the park, and then you take them to the visitor center and do the Junior Ranger program. I haven't talked about the Junior Ranger program, but my kids got a Junior Ranger badge at every single park they've been to, and that Junior Ranger program is probably the best thing that the National Park Service does, hands down. And so do not ever miss the chance to get your kid a Junior Ranger badge.
Chris, we appreciate so much the time you spent with us today, man. Before we sign off, is there anything else you want to drop on us? That sounds like you just did the other thing that might have been on your mind, but by all means, if there's anything else you want to share with the alphas, please, let us know now. Now's the time.
I just think I'll emphasize the main point of why I do all of this, which is that, and then synthesize it into the simplest form, which is parks are patriotism. And patriotism is parks, right? And so if you love this country, you need to love our national parks. You need to love the system that created them. You need to love the idea of them. You need to physically love them. You don't have to go to them if you don't want to, but you got to respect that, the rest of us want to, and we own this. And so find your own way to express it, but parks are patriotism. And I hope that so many veterans kind of take that to heart.
Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure to have you, brother. Your love for the parks, your love for the country, and your patriotism is undeniable. Quite the model to emulate. Thanks for visiting us today. Alpha, stick around for some scuttlebutt after the break.
Honoring those who came before us. The American Legion pays perpetual respect for all past military sacrifices to ensure they are never forgotten by new generations. We are veterans strengthened in America. We are the American Legion.
All right, Alphas, we hope you had a fantastic, great
Kit Kat break.
A super good break. And now it's time for some scuttlebutt.
All right, Joe. The Air Force is warning airmen and veterans of a foreign intelligence recruitment ploy. According to an article at Breaking Defense, if that consulting gig seems too good to be true, it probably is. If that voiceover work seems too good to be true, Joe. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations, normally you want to stay clear of them, warned airmen and former service members of a recruitment scheme that could trick them into working for foreign intelligence entities. Nobody wants to be that guy tricked to working for foreign intelligence
There's going to be like a thing named after the first person that really falls for it. It's going to be like, don't fall under the Mar law.
I accidentally started working for a foreign government.
Accidental spy. Oopsie.
Annual training. In an AFOSI, Office of Special Projects report, Executive Director Lee Russ said, there aren't job offers, they're intelligence operations in disguise. Our adversaries are targeting the very people who've kept this nation secure. The AFOSI warning says the offers come in the form of social media messages that offer high-paying consulting jobs. According to unnamed counterintelligence analysts quoted in the same report, foreign actors reach out to service members privately. What
via
someone does on their
yeah,
watch out for all those phishing attempts on MySpace. What someone does on their personal account doesn't necessarily have the same safeguards as an official one, and adversaries are taking advantage of that. The warning follows others from elsewhere in the U.S. government and from international partners. Recently, the National Counterintelligence and Security Center reportedly said foreign spies, including Chinese intelligence specifically, were targeting current and former U.S. government employees for recruitment by posing as consulting firms, corporate headhunters, think tanks, and other entities on social and professional networking sites. In June 2024, the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Partnership collectively pointed the finger at China's efforts to recruit current and former Western military personnel to train the PRC military. To overcome their shortcomings, China's People Liberation Army has been aggressively recruiting Western military talent to train their aviators, using private firms around the globe that conceal their PLA ties and offer recruits exorbitant salaries. Then NCSC Director Michael Casey said, recent actions by Western governments have impacted these operations, but PLA recruitment efforts continue to evolve in response. So, look, when I got out in 2015, after being a company commander, flying Apaches in combat, all that stuff, you couldn't have told me anything. I thought I was the greatest gift capable of doing anything to the world. And I would have thought, like, yes, of course, like consulting firm, agency, but of course I'm worth 200, 3, whatever. In all reality, when I went to work for a large global consulting firm, I came in as a low-level consultant and had to go through the rigorous process of learning the way that business was done and being able to apply that to creating tangible business value. So I guess like the simple thing I'm trying to say there is, while we may feel in our hearts that that's our worth, if you don't have the qualifications and skill set that yet really map to that, it's kind of in a too good to be true situation.
And that's rough because things are tough right now. and you put people in a really bad position when you give somebody hope. It's just a messed up. I mean, I put this, the way that things are now, I put this on with scamming the elderly. Like, the Air Force, they're just cute little dudes and gals just trying to live their lives. Couldn't make it in the Navy. Like, life's rough already. That was an awful jab. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it.
This tactic only works on the Air Force because they value themselves that much. So
I wonder if it's like if they're more susceptible or just they have more access. Like, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of intelligence jobs in.
There is,
and I think that's probably really just more. It's like when scammers will use poorly spelled emails, they're going for quality of contact, not bulk. They're not trying to look legit. They want the right people that are going to reach back out and be like, is this real? Well, I misspelled your name in 14 other words, and so if you're dumb enough to write me back, you're exactly who we're looking for.
It just falls into this, right? Which is like, we all think we're going to be like, hey kid, eating an ice cream cone. You're on the side of the road. You're just the kid I need to eat an ice cream cone just like that in my movie. Come over here and be the, it's this thing we play out in our mind where it's like, oh, of course I'm valuable enough that somebody will reach out to me in my messages and that they're gonna like court me so much, but that's not how the process is.
Unfortunately,
unfortunately. Okay. Jeez. Well, now you're warned. Now you know. So no excuses. Stop working.
Don't join the Air Force, or you're going to get scammed.
Stop working for foreign intelligence.
Yeah, stop being a spy for. We've told you to stop spying for other countries. We've talked about this. Jeez, guys. Also, in case you didn't know, this week is the 140th anniversary of the invention of Coca-Cola. And as an Atlanta guy, let me say,
that's right.
If you haven't been to the World of Coke, if you haven't went through there and tasted Beverly, one of the finest beverages that's ever existed, I don't know why, but if you ever go to the World of Coke and you haven't tasted Beverly, they have samples of all the drinks they've ever made. And Beverly is the finest. Imagine Tab if it was worse. Beverly is a life-changing experience. And I don't know who it was named after, but somebody is owed an apology named Beverly somewhere. That drink is life-altering. But I do love Coke. Coke Zero specifically. Developed by the American pharmacist John Pemberton, who had quite the plan at the get-go. As a cure-all tonic, the original formula was based on cocaine from the coca leaf and caffeine-rich extracts of the cola nut. And I think it's going to circle back around. All the rich people are doing it. So cocaine was removed from the formula around 1903 from some spoil sport. To clarify, I have never done this drug, but it sounds like an absolute blast. I don't know. Don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. Coca-Cola gained widespread popularity among Americans in World War I, establishing itself as a staple among troops. An Army officer stationed in Waco, Texas during the war in 1918 said, "Unless we've got Coca-Cola, we will have to admit defeat at the hands of the enemy heat and thirst." That's how he sounded. We actually have a recording.
We had a Coke person on hand for him to be able to say that. You know what? Quote him on that.
And this was after the cocaine was taken out. So I just would like to clarify, that's pure taste right there, buddy. So in 1941, Coca-Cola President Robert Woodruff decreed that every man in a uniform gets a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents wherever he is and whatever it costs the company. In this discount, the appeal of Coca-Cola's flavor and competitor Pepsi's restricted access to military bases propelled the drink to immense popularity among troops in World War II. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, I don't know if you know what the D stands for, but I bet you can guess. I think it's Dwight, actually. Noticed the early success of bottling plants established in 44 countries during World War II and sent an urgent telegram. I didn't know telegram was invented back then, but from his allied, and for anyone who doesn't get it, that's a joke.
Social media joke. It's a social media joke.
I know. Telegram's great. And I'm sure old telegrams were even better. Martha, put me through to. Okay. Let's see here. Urgent telegram from his Allied headquarters and we're talking about Dwight Eisenhower here. Sent a urgent telegram from his Allied headquarters in North Africa to Coca-Cola headquarters in Atlanta, where Dwight David Eisenhower, as super producer Holly has now told me, with David, of course.
David.
It's capitals. So Allied, he sent to highlight the importance of these plants. So dated June 29th, 1943, his request included 10 portable factories, 6 million filled bottles of Coke a month, and the materials and resources to provide American GIs with the refreshingly cool and crisp suds that increase their spirits with every sip. Why are they not using that as a tagline? Dwight David Eisenhower said we needed the resources to provide American GIs with the refreshingly cool and crisp. You would never need to change that. Like, so I'm getting choked up just thinking about the beauty of Dwight David Eisenhower.
Man, a cool, crisp, refreshing Coca-Cola immediately with 0
it increases
calories.
my spirits with every sip. But in response, 148 representatives from Coke were assigned the title of technical observers, or TOs, given Army fatigues and treated like commissioned officers. So affectionately nicknamed Coca-Cola Colonels, which is fantastic. They were tasked with ensuring that every American GI, regardless of their location, had access to Coca-Cola. Like other American companies during World War II, Coca-Cola became a source of comfort for those serving amidst the chaos of war. And in the end, Coca-Cola distributed an astounding 5 billion bottles of Coke. And that's pretty
Look, guys,
cool.
I got some bad news. We got a global war. Most of you probably won't come back from it, but we are going to have Coke everywhere.
Some of you may die.
Promote the majors to colonels. Get them out there.
Here's your bottle of water and your cold Coke.
Well, you know,
it's been worse. It's been worse. It's better than potable water. So there we go. But we have the links in our show notes.
Happy birthday, Coca-Cola.
Yeah, happy birthday, Coca-Cola.
Let's bring back that 1903
you know, when
model.
they bring out every once in a while, they bring out the classic. They're never really going to bring out the classic. They're never going to do.
You can't bring out the
1902 version. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So what? So it's 140 years old. That model was around for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the bottles were way cooler. Also, those bottles back in the day, you could kill people with them.
My
Not
favorite.
that I know.
I mean, I love a Coke Zero, but my favorite is probably and it's hard to drink the whole thing now because you know the sugar content. But the Mexican
it's so
Cokes,
spicy.
So spicy. Do you do the orange
this
one?
Coke is so spicy.
I actually like a cherry Coke Zero. It's probably like my favorite. Like I love that. Do you try the orange one?
You have just got done cutting the grass, or when you're in war in Europe, nothing quite hits the spot.
What, when you're in a battle and it's bulging?
Like, could you imagine you're hunting them down and then like you're hiding and somebody's burping because they just absolutely tanked one. I just know that when I was in Fallujah, I loved the refreshingly cool and crisp suds that increased my spirits with every sip. Kept me going, man. I do love Coke. All joking aside, I do love Coca-Cola. So there we go.
Yeah.
And I love you. Wait, was that out loud?
A lot of love. A lot of love.
Love.
All right, Alphas. Thanks for listening like you always do. And like always, you can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send Joe some mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next week.